The European Union and Ukraine have signed a deal to jointly boost the production of drones as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made her second visit to Kyiv this year. The new framework is meant to combine the EU's industrial base with Ukraine's extensive expertise in drones, gained across more than 4 years of fighting against Russian troops. Drones have become an integral part of modern warfare, which has allowed Kyiv to overcome its manpower disadvantage and launch long-range strikes deep inside Russian territory. Zelensky says his country currently produces 10 million drones a year, a figure he has ambitiously set out to double. Funding for the initiative will come from two EU sources, the €90 billion support loan to Ukraine and the roughly $10 billion still available in the Safe Defense program.
This deal will bring together Ukrainian ingenuity and Europe's industrial scale. And with this deal, our message is clear. Now is the time to invest in Ukraine, because this means to invest in Europe and to invest in our common security and our common future.
In her speech announcing the deal, she detailed that Europe can gain from Ukraine's battleground-tested expertise, emphasizing that such a partnership is indispensable to both. The deal also features plans to further boost cooperation between the EU and Ukraine, with the allies penciling plans to explore the production of ballistic and anti-ballistic missiles in the future.
With wars raging across the globe, conflict is the main driver of global food insecurity. While the ripple effects can be felt across the globe, Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Karel Skau, told Euronews it is those on the front line that really bear the brunt. In Ukraine, Skau explains how the combat zone has expanded from 15 kilometers from the active front line to roughly 50 kilometers, leaving many in need of shelter, food and resources.
We deliver to almost 700,000 people who are stuck on that front line every month. And so where there are no markets, it's food, it's packages with food. Where there are some functioning markets, it's cash. But we're also supporting the children that are in these bunker schools on the front lines with school meals. It's a way of ensuring that they have at least one nutritious meal a day.
Skau also told Europe today that the Iran war has disrupted the agency's humanitarian operations worldwide, threatening supply chains and driving up costs.
The most immediate humanitarian impact has been, of course, in Lebanon, with hundreds of thousands of displaced people there. But at a second level, it has hit our humanitarian operations across the globe.
After aid cuts put some of its operations at risk, the World Food Programme received an $800 million grant from the United States last month. The funding will help the agency provide food aid and support in some of the world's most vulnerable regions.
The European Commission has handed out to the United States a list of EU products it wants to see exempted from the 15% tariffs imposed under the Turnberry trade deal last year. The list, seen by Euronews, includes hundreds of products such as Roquefort cheese, olive oil, wines, spirits and beer, pasta, medical devices, electrical equipment and machinery.
We really want to look at as many areas as possible where we can reduce or eliminate tariffs for the benefit of both sides, for the benefit of exporters, for the benefit of consumers, and generally to ensure that we strengthen the EU-US trade and investment relationship.
The list covers around €150 billion worth of EU exports. The products concerned are either economically meaningful for the EU or have a limited domestic availability in the US, an EU trade official said. In July 2025, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump clinched a deal in Turnberry, Scotland, after weeks of trade disputes. Europeans would pay 15% US tariffs on EU exports while removing their own tariffs on US industrial goods. The European Commission hopes to secure carve-outs and to discuss steel and aluminium, which are still subject to 15% US tariffs.
Ambassadors of EU countries agreed on Wednesday to extend the temporary protection status granted to Ukrainians fleeing the war until March 2028. However, men aged 23 to 60 are excluded from the scheme. From March 2027, temporary protection will be granted only to those who have fulfilled their military obligations in Ukraine, a move aimed at strengthening Kiev's armed forces in response to requests from the Ukrainian government. Ukraine's martial law prevents most men aged 23 and over from leaving the country, as they are subject to military service obligations. Despite this, some Ukrainian men of draft age have crossed the country's borders illegally and obtained temporary protection in EU countries in recent years. Frontex data show that almost 1,000 people illegally crossed Ukraine's border into the EU this year, and more than 10,000 did so in 2025. Adult men account for 26.6% of Ukrainian refugees in Europe. People who are already benefiting from temporary protection in the EU will not be affected by the change in the rules. Established after Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, the scheme has allowed Ukrainians to live in EU countries without having to apply for asylum. The British government announced plans for a voluntary overnight social media curfew for 16 and 17-year-olds on Wednesday, in its latest effort to reduce online harm among young people. It said that features that can keep users scrolling for longer, such as video that automatically play one after another, will also be switched off by default for older teenagers. The ban will apply to platforms including Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and X, but not messaging services such as WhatsApp and Signal. The measures are among the final initiatives of Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government and will require legislation before they take effect. The proposals are widely expected to be carried forward by his likely successor, Andy Burnham. Critics questioned the effectiveness of the measures, arguing that teenagers would simply switch off the default settings. UK Online Safety Minister dismissed the suggestion, saying it was a disservice to teenagers. The NSPCC, the UK's leading children's charity, said the proposals will go some way to improving the experiences of young people on social media, but that they will not be enough on their own.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed they have launched missiles and drone strikes at US targets in Bahrain and Kuwait. Authorities in Jordan also said it shot down 3 incoming Iranian missiles, and the Kuwaiti army reported that Iranian hostile drone assaults were being repelled by its air defenses. Tehran's attacks come as US forces carried out strikes against Iran for a 4th day in a row, lasting 7 hours. The US also reimposed its blockade of Iranian ports early Wednesday over Tehran's attacks on vessels attempting to cross the Strait of Hormuz. According to local media, the Iran's Revolutionary Guards said its attacks were a reaction to American military actions and attempts to control the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, earlier, US President Donald Trump threatened to strike Iran's power plants if Tehran does not make a deal.
Next week comes the power plants. Next week comes the bridges. We're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate.
The fragile ceasefire signed on the 17th of June has collapsed, with parties focusing on the control of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said US strikes on Iran would continue until he declared it's enough.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, should continue traffic stops. It comes just one day after the Homeland Security Department said they would be halting them. ICE had been instructed to suspend the traffic stops to detain immigrants after 2 fatal shootings by ICE agents. On Monday morning, one agent fatally shot a motorist in Biddeford in Maine. The 26-year-old Colombian had permission to work in the U.S. The Department of Homeland Security said that its officers had been monitoring the home of a person with a final deportation order, and that when they tried to stop the vehicle leaving the address, the driver attempted to flee. One witness said he heard the victim say he tried to stop. The fatal episode followed another deadly ICE shooting 1 week prior, when plainclothes agents in unmarked vehicles pursued and killed a 52-year-old Mexican man. At least 10 people have been killed during immigration operations since the start of the Trump administration's mass deportation campaign, 4 of them during vehicle stops.
China's economy slowed sharply to 4.3% year-on-year growth in the April-June quarter, the government said Wednesday, making it the weakest pace in over 3 years. The official data fell short of forecasts and was below the economy's 5% growth pace in the previous quarter, despite a surge in exports driven in part by the AI boom and demand for Chinese electric vehicles.
这个以高端制造、数字经济、现代服务为代表的这样一些新动能，对上半年经济增长的贡献率超过了40%。这还不算传统行业这个改造升级，这不算啊。这我们讲就这些行业增长40%。所以说啊，这个经济向新向优的这种特点呢非常鲜明啊，而且总的发展的趋势是在加快。
Despite the broader economic slowdown due to the war in Iran, consumer spending remained resilient and industrial production exceeded expectations. Some economists say China's economic slowdown is due to its increasing unbalance as public and private investments pour into technologies such as AI and computer chips, while manufacturing and job-creating service industries languish. It creates worries over whether AI and robotics businesses will create enough jobs to sustain growth in the longer term.